Hi, it's David Meerman Scott. I just got finished with Mitch Joel's book, Ctrl Alt Delete, which I really liked because Mitch, like me, sees that there's a revolution going on in business today. There's a revolution going on in the way people are communicating today, and there's a revolution going on around the nature of work. And it was a pleasure to read Mitch's ideas around that. So, first question. Mitch, and I really appreciate you taking the time to answer some questions for us, is business purgatory. Tell us a little bit about what business purgatory is. It's such an interesting concept.
Hey David, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate all the work that you do as well, and I appreciate the kind words about my book. Business purgatory is one of those interesting things. We live in a world that has changed so dramatically. About 15 years ago, I would sit down from clients, as I know you did as well, and inevitably the client would sort of lean into the table and say to me, so like, why do we need a website again? And like, while we can sort of laugh at that, the truth is that things have changed so dramatically. They really, really have. And if you think about what that question was, it's because they thought the web was a fad. They thought it was something that may not have happened. It could have gone away. That's hell. I mean, that's a place where you really have no certainty. If you fast forward to today and we talk about things like mobile, search, local data, and things like that, what you begin to realize is that we're not in hell anymore. Those things are happening. They're here. They are inevitable. If they aren't already now, and I think they are. And so that is purgatory. That's not hell. Purgatory is the place where things have changed fundamentally and you're just not doing enough about them. And what I was trying to do with Ctrl Alt Delete is set the path and create the course where we could take businesses out of this purgatory, at least put them on the roadmap towards it.
So the whole idea of the book is to reboot business, to reboot you, reboot your career. Why don't you tell us a little bit first about your concept of what people need to do to reboot business?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, David. There's probably 5 core movements that I talk about in the book that I think businesses need to focus on, and I'll quickly go through them. One is they need to understand how dramatic the power of direct relationships have changed. Suddenly, it's not just about having that direct relationship against a competitor. Suddenly, it's about how do you battle for that direct relationship when all of your business partners are battling for that direct relationship. So the analogy would be, imagine I bought a pair of headphones, and I bought those headphones, they're Beats by Dre. I bought them at Target. And I'm asking you to like me, or the brand is actually asking you to like them on Facebook. If you just think about that, somebody purchased something for $150 and suddenly they're being asked to like them on Facebook by Beats, they're asked to like them on Facebook from Target, they're asked to like them on Facebook. Who owns the direct relationship with the consumer? And that's the sort of thing I need people to start thinking about right now to reboot their business. They must have that direct relationship, but the competition for it is fierce. The other thing is just the simple data and analytics. There's information out there right now that helps businesses be more effective. It's not just the linear data, the email addresses and how a campaign does. There's something I call the circular data. The circular data is the stuff that consumers are willfully producing and putting up online. It's things like their Facebook profiles, their Twitter, blogs, things like that. And suddenly you have this perspective of consumers that we never had before. And so it's about selling beyond the demographics and psychographics and actually connecting to the people and who they are and how they matter. Next up is utility. Brands can actually create utility, things people will actually use. The new real estate isn't necessarily where you put your office so that you attract the best talent, or where your physical store is so you get all the foot traffic. But the new real estate happens, right here on these devices. The home screen of these devices is the new real estate. And how does a brand make it themselves that effective so that they would reside on the home screen of those devices? It's not easy, but if you look to examples like Charmin, the toilet paper company, they have an app called Sit or Squat. Literally, you hit the app, it'll tell you based off of where you are, how close you are to a clean bathroom. I know it sounds funny, everyone's probably laughing and downloading it at the same time, but it's true. It's all based off of a wiki platform. Anybody can rate bathrooms, add bathrooms, and on and on and on. And it's a true utility. It complements the coupons and all the other stuff that brands do. So you create a more holistic, brand narrative or brand experience, if you will. The next thing is thinking about media in a different way, not about social media or traditional media, but about when is media active or passive. When are consumers active or passive? Think about TV. TV is pushing everybody to like and follow and friend and chat and do all this stuff. And the truth is there's a vast majority of the population that just wants to sit back and watch TV or wants to sit back and read a book. They don't want links and audio things and video components to it. They just want to read. And I think we could better serve our businesses in rebooting them by thinking about when are the consumers active with their media, when are they passive with their media, when is the media active, when is the media passive, and when is the platform passive or active. So think about Google. Google is an intent-based engine. You're on Google, you're proactively searching, so you're active on the platform. You are on the internet, which in and of itself is an active platform, or a mobile device, again, active platform. And then what they did is they bolted on AdWords. And AdWords is an ad format that actually really complements that whole experience. And that's why I think when you look at Google's ad revenue, it's that much greater than the entire US print industry. So that's a sort of other predominant part. And the last thing is thinking about the world in what I call a one-screen world, where it's not about three screens, web, TV, mobile devices, or tablets, which is a fourth screen, but just this idea of one screen, where the only screen that matters is the screen that's in front of me. The engagements that we create in a world where screens are ubiquitous, they're connected, they're speaking to each other. These are the profound things that I want businesses to think about and how they reimagine their businesses, how they connect to consumers, and how they actually build their business model based off of this reboot.
Okay, so how about rebooting you? I mean, clearly we've got the business that needs to be rebooted, and then we need to reboot us, ourselves, our careers. What about rebooting you?
The infamous question, how do we reboot you? I think the important thing for people to understand is we just live in a fundamentally different world. We used to live in a world where people would work for 25, 30 years. They'd get the gold watch, they'd get the pension, they'd have some sort of rubber chicken dinner with everybody from work. They'd maybe get a plaque and then off to Mexico for tequila. We quickly transitioned into this very different world where people would have 5 to 6 different jobs within the span of their career. We used to call them job hoppers, or people who didn't know what they do or they weren't focused. And suddenly what we learned in the digital era is that it's not that at all. People can actually have projects and work on projects and work in very different ways. And now what we're seeing is a very different world. We're seeing a world where people will literally have 5 to 7 different careers in their lifetime. These are massive and big changes. And so what I want people to do is what I call embrace the squiggly. I want them to understand that the career is not a linear path that goes at a 45-degree angle, that the people we admire and respect most are the ones who have the most dynamic careers. Some of them have spikes that go up and then pretty dramatic drops as well. Sometimes they're more circular, sometimes they look like a box or a triangle. They could look like any shape in the world, actually. But we have to sort of embrace that. We have to embrace these different types of paths because now we're really capable of living what Richard Florida called the creative class. I mean, you actually can make a living doing a lot of hyper-creative things or building a business around a lifestyle. Check out Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Work Week. And you start seeing that we can do things differently. I mean, just anybody can take these devices that we're talking through and build a multi-million-dollar business on their own. And so it just fundamentally changes how we see ourselves. Now, I realize that sounds like that's a lot, like it's a lot for startups and entrepreneurs, but the truth is you can bring that entrepreneurial spirit, that startup spirit, that lean spirit to the work that you do. And so what I hope to do in the second part of the book, which is called Reboot You, is create that sort of path for people. It's about things like embracing a digital-first posture as well, and just thinking differently about what the work environment means and then what you have to bring to it. The truth is, I could have written the first part of the book and just left it at that, but I felt like I really had to explore deeply, and it goes into a lot of detail about what it means to be viable in this work environment. So hopefully those are some keys that'll get people excited to really dive deep into what it means to reevaluate how we as individuals come to work each and every day.
Mitch, interesting concept in the book that I'd like you to sort of expand on a little bit is your concept of squiggles. Gosh, I always love when somebody kind of coins a term and pushes something out there. Seth Godin, our mutual friend, is a master at that. So tell me about squiggles, please.
The mighty squiggle. Once I mentioned it, people ask me again and again to deeper dive into that. So I had a friend, she was 16 when she went into a guidance counselor's office in high school and said, I'm not sure what I want to do with my life. And they looked at her marks and talked about it, and she was fairly good in math and science. And the guidance counselor recommended potentially going into engineering. And so she did, and she did okay. She did great in university. She got a great job. She got the pinky ring, the whole deal. Family, got married, house, mortgage, the works, the sort of the great American dream, as it were. And we were having lunch not that long ago, just before I started writing the book, actually. And she was sort of lamenting about how down she was about her career and where she was in work. And I was really curious, why? And we started talking about it. She told me that career trajectory. And I jokingly said, it's amazing that the choices we made when we were 16 years old, like how they impact the rest of our lives. And I mean, if you could hear a jaw hit the floor, it would have been that sound. And I realized at that moment that I wouldn't want pictures of me when I was 16 published, let alone basing my entire life in my age that I'm in now on those decisions. And I think it's that realization that people sometimes make decisions and feel like they're forced, like they've got that hand that's been forced. And the idea of Squiggle is to really also push beyond the fact that careers don't have that trajectory like we just talked about, but more importantly, that it's okay to experiment. It's okay to be multidisciplinary. That's not a lack of focus. It's not a lack of skill. It's just the ability to think differently about what a proper career trajectory can look like. And I think, again, if you going back to what we just talked about, the most interesting people we know really do squiggle. It is not a clear path.
Okay, Mitch. Ctrl Alt Delete. What are we saying here? Are we saying that only people who use Microsoft products need to reboot? What about people who use Apple products? Because, for example, my daughter, she's 20, she goes to university. She's not going to even know what Ctrl Alt Delete means. She'll see that on a bookstore shelf, she'll hear the concept, and she won't know what those three bang 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 mean. I've personally been using an Apple computer now for probably 8 years, I think, something like that. And I kind of remember what Ctrl Alt Delete is. So what does this mean for Apple guys and Apple gals and Apple kids? Ctrl Alt Delete.
Very funny, David. Listen, I'm doing this on my Apple products. I showed you before my other Apple products. I'm a big Apple guy too. Control Alt Delete, come on. Does Command Option Escape sound like a good book name? Does it sound like a good book name if I say hold the home button? I kid. No, listen, part of the play with it is also to sort of demonstrate how quickly that sort of thing goes away. And I actually talk a lot in the book about how by the time I write this book, the title might not be even relevant. And that's the whole point, is that we have this sort of exponential growth in technology, believe it or not, exponential growth in marketing, exponential growth in business, and that the things we sort of latch onto and understand as these sort of, I call them the dogma of our world, are fundamentally changing. So listen, if it makes you feel better, call the book Command Option Escape.
It would not be an interview and a conversation with Mitch Joel without touching on music, because Mitch and I are both huge music fans. I think Mitch is one of the very few people who I know well who has seen more shows than I have. I'm just under 600 live shows so far. I'm going to one tomorrow night, actually. I'm going to see Mickey Hart Band. So Mitch, what is your latest thinking about what today, I'm talking about 2013, what can we, all of us, learn from the music business? What can businesses learn from the music business? What can we as individuals learn from the music business?
Oh, David, you're doing much better than I am in terms of going to see shows, so good on you. Your pace is impressive. With my young kids, I simply can't do it, but I'm listening to a lot of great new bands. Check out The Head and the Heart, by the way, great band on SubHub. I think there's actually a lot of lessons that we can look at in terms of the music industry, because the truth is that what fascinates me most about that industry is the fact that we've never been listening to more music than we have today. Discovery tools, Spotify, RDO, what we're doing online in terms of sharing content and finding content. And I also think, contrary to what people believe, that everyone's stealing and grabbing music, maybe not. I think that iTunes and other platforms like that have made it systematically easier for people to access music. And I bet that the whole stealing thing is probably declining. I don't have the data to prove it, so I'm not sure. But I think what it does prove is the lesson. And the lesson is that brands, like musicians, need to create a holistic experience, and maybe it's not just the one thing. For years, these bands really banked on everything relying on selling the music, but if you go back in time, bands actually released music as a teaser to the live experience. And I think what we have in today's world, whether it's merchandise and touring and creating different types of music, is the brands that do things really interestingly look no further than what Amanda Palmer had done in Kickstarter. And I know it's a bit of the sort of old cliche at this point, but very, very true. She was actually leveraging a lot of the components that I talk about in Ctrl Alt Delete. right? She was building a direct relationship with her listeners. She was understanding the data and the dynamics of it because she was interacting with them at a social level. She created a huge level of utility for them, tools they could really use and engage with, whether it was a book or home concerts and things like that. She really engaged the type of media that they were doing, when they were active with their media, when they were passive with it. And she really embraced the idea of the one screen world, where she hit people on all their different screens, whether it was mobile or web or whatever it might be, and really connected that experience in a holistic way. So I actually think that in this day and age, it is very, very challenging for new bands to get known just because there's so much out there. But I think it's also never been easier, whether you think about tools like YouTube or Spotify, or whether you just look in general about how bands, I call them brands, how brands who are bands and brands who are bands can really actually connect to consumers. They don't need the gatekeepers of a record industry anymore to actually access an audience. They can do it on their own. So the money may be different, the dynamics of how money is made may be different, but the opportunity for people to make music, to make their art and share it with the world, it's never been better.
So thanks very much, Mitch, for speaking with us again. The book, Ctrl Alt Delete, I loved it, and so will you. Thanks for coming by, Mitch, and spending some time with us.
Well, thank you so much, David, for having me here. I really appreciate it. I'm such a huge fan of everything you do. We've known each other from basically day one, and I'm really excited and hopeful that you'll come on my podcast and talk about the new version of the new rules of marketing and PR. I know it's going to be one of the books that I tell everybody to buy, as I always do. And hopefully I'll see you on the road, or we can catch a show really soon. And I appreciate you. Thank you.